Bring in Chris Rosvoglou from Boot Krewe Media. Saints and the Bengals in the Superdome this weekend. Chris, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me as always.
Well, okay, and we appreciate your time, of course. Let's start with the injury report because it's long again, and we got to start there. So, who's in? Who's out? Who's a maybe for the weekend?
Yeah, I think I'm going to start with the one that's pretty concerning given the matchup they have and who they're going to go up against, and that's the Marshawn Lattimore situation. From everything that I've kind of heard on this is one of those where I would be surprised if he plays this Sunday. And obviously that'd be a huge blow to this team, right? Going up against Jamar Chase and possibly T. Higgins, who was also banged up, and Tyler Boyd. Not having Lattimore out there would really hurt a secondary that's already struggling. On the positive side of things, it seems like Chris Olave's trending in the right direction. Now, we got to see today if he passes the next phase of concussion protocol. If he does that, then he'll most likely be on track to play Sunday, which would obviously be great news for this offense. Where things get a little dicey is the Michael Thomas situation. No one has really heard much about it. I know Schefter said last Sunday that we could see him against the Bengals, and that was obviously great news, but don't hear anything on Wednesday. We'll see if anything happens over the next 2 days, but that one's kind of leaning in the wrong direction at the moment. And then possibly some positive news here. It seems like Marcus May is getting a little bit better, and this defense could really use him out there. So if he's there, that will definitely ease the blow of losing Lattimore. But right now it's looking a little dicey with this secondary.
And I want to get to the secondary in a minute, but what's the latest on Jameis?
Yeah, with Jameis, this is all part of the process. I don't really expect him to play this Sunday. I still think that it's going to be Andy Dalton. But at some point, obviously, he had to get back on the practice field. And with the Saints having that short week against Arizona, who knows? It might be a situation where Andy Dalton starts this week, and depending on how that goes, if Jameis's back is healing and his ankle's healing, then maybe he starts that Thursday night game against Arizona. But everything seems to be trending up for him. But I would still be surprised if he does play this weekend against the Bengals.
Let's get back to the Marcus May thing and what adjustments they've been forced to make with him out there and how that's affected what they're doing pretty much throughout that entire secondary.
Yeah, it's huge, right? Because when you look at this secondary, you build it around Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu at the safety spot, and right now May's been out since the Buccaneers game, and you thought P.J. Williams could be that fill-in, but now he's on IR, so you don't have that option. So it's been a lot of Justin Evans, and it's also been a lot of J.T. Gray, and no disrespect to J.T. Gray because he's been an all-pro special teams player throughout his time in New Orleans. He's not accustomed to playing in that full-time safety role, and I don't really know if he's equipped to handle that. So you're really trying to rely on third-string and fourth-string options at safety right now. And that's why you're seeing games like Sunday where Geno Smith's throwing it down the field to Tyler Lockett and throwing it down the field to DK Metcalf. And those big plays that the Saints have really bottled up the last couple of years with guys like Marcus Williams, that's no longer the case because of the lack of depth right now in the secondary. So that's been the big problem. And at some point, you really just can't find a way to replace those guys. I know everyone loves the next man up mentality and things of that nature, but we've seen the secondary really change ever since Marcus May's been out. We've seen big plays to Justin Jefferson in week 4. We've seen big plays to Tyler Lockett in week 5. You even think about the Laviska Shenault touchdown in week 3 where you had P.J. Williams miss the tackle. So right now it's really just a depth concern. I think if Marcus May comes back, all of a sudden the Saints don't feel like they're trying to overcompensate for things. And it also takes a lot of pressure off Tyrann Mathieu's play. He's got a lot going on right now, and I don't know if that's probably factoring into why we haven't seen him play at his best. But, May's injury has really put guys who are not supposed to be full-time safeties into those roles.
Let's talk about the run game and not the run Taysom Hill game. We'll get to Taysom Hill in a second, but they did get the running game going last week with Alvin Kamara as well as they have at any point this year. So is it real or is it fiction? Did they get a good matchup, or was a lot of this because at some point the Seahawks started to key on Taysom Hill and some other things opened up, or have they really found something and unlocked something in the run game?
So I think like the overall number, when you see how many yards they ran for last Sunday, part of that was the matchup. Seattle had the 29th ranked run defense going into it. But I do think that they found something, but I think they found it in the London game. You know, we go back to that Vikings game, and Latavius Murray got picked up off the street and had 5.2 yards per carry. And that kind of sparked all the controversy and debate about him going to Denver and how that was a big blow to this team. But if you go back and watch that game, whether it was Ruiz, whether it was Eric McCoy, in the run game, they were opening up a lot of holes, and I thought that was something that could carry over Seattle, and the fact that it did in that manner, I do think that the Saints are starting to form a little bit of an identity on offense. I know coming into this year, when you get all the shiny toys like a Chris Olave and a Jarvis Landry and the return of Michael Thomas, you think, okay, maybe kind of an air raid offense and move the ball through the air. I think this team is going to be a ground and pound attack, and I think what Alvin Kamara was able to do is no fluke. I think that will continue to happen against the Cincinnati defense that just gave up 155 yards on the ground to Baltimore. So I think that's possible. What I want to see now, though, is if they can get production out of Mark Ingram, because I feel comfortable with what they're getting out of Taysom Hill, and I think Kamara will continue to produce. But they also need that running back 2 spot to produce. I mean, Ingram had 9 carries on Sunday, but only 16 yards. So they want to give those touches to another complimentary back. They just need the production to be valid. So I do think they definitely found something. Was it a favorable matchup? Sure. But we've seen over the last couple of weeks, this offensive line is really starting to hit its stride.
What is a realistic amount of usage for Taysom Hill? We saw him sporadically in the first 4 games. We saw him a lot more last week, and they needed every bit of it. So what now is a realistic usage rate for him?
Yeah, I think, honestly, looking at the way this game just played out against Seattle, if they're going to use him primarily as that QB power, run the football type of guy, I think the usage that they just had against Seattle, where he played about 30% of the snaps, I think that's the comfort zone. Now, you can obviously increase that usage if Jameis Winston comes back, because you don't have to worry about the doomsday scenario that, well, he's the backup quarterback and he might get hurt. So maybe it upticks a little bit. But I think if you're going to utilize him primarily as a runner, I don't know if the workload changes that much, right? Because at some point, if you run him too many times, he might break down. I mean, this is unfortunately a player who last year we saw a lot of injuries, whether it was the concussion or the foot injury or the mallet finger injury that he had. So I think the way they used him, 9 carries, maybe mix it up with a couple of throws here and there. I know he had the touchdown pass to Troutman, and as teams continue to inch closer to the line of scrimmage, I think there's going to be opportunities for him to kind of pull the trigger. So I think maybe a couple more passes dialed up. But the one thing I think will kind of get thrown out the window are the passes to Taysom Hill. I know he was kind of marked as a tight end going into this year, but I feel like that's kind of been thrown out the window for now. So I think similar usage, 30% of the offensive snaps seems fair to me, and make sure you just don't overutilize them on the run. I think 9 carries is the sweet spot right now.
The Cincinnati Bengals at 2-3, along with the Saints, probably thinking before the season that they would be in better shape record-wise than what they are. So when you look at this matchup, the places that the Saints have an advantage, the positions that where the Saints are at a significant disadvantage, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think in terms of disadvantage right now, with Lattimore being banged up, with the Debo being banged up, and Marcus May, his rib injury being a little bit in question, I am concerned about how do the Saints match up with a Bengals offense that we know what Jamar Chase can do on any given week. We know that Tyler Boyd and Hayden Hurst are really starting to own the middle. I think Hayden Hurst has kind of been a sneaky X factor for the Bengals over the last 2 weeks. That being said, I think that the Saints, if you look at the way Cam Jordan's played the last 3 games, I think there's an opportunity here for him to get after Joe Burrow, and that's kind of the main thing we talk about when we think about the Bengals, and everyone talks about Joe Burrow. He's taken a lot of hits, and even the Ravens game, you might think that he wasn't under a lot of pressure, but they still gave up 3 sacks. There are still moments where he's running out of the pocket, and I think for the Saints, that front 7 of theirs can really create some noise and get some pressure on Joe Burrow. So I think guys like Demario Davis, guys like Pete Werner, if you're using them on a blitz, or if you're just letting them kind of QB spy for a little bit, I think those are moments where the Saints can really get after the Bengals. I'd give them the advantage there. I also think that this run attack, when we talk about with Taysom Hill and Kamara, I think that's also going to be a plus. I think that for the Saints, you can get after that Cincinnati run defense and really break them down. Now, the pass rush is a little bit different. I think Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson have the opportunity to maybe wreck the game, just like I said with Cam Jordan on the other side. But that's kind of what I'm looking at. And the other factor that I'm intrigued to see what happens, and I talked about it a little bit yesterday, I almost feel like it's the forgotten phase for the Saints this year, is special teams. And I think for New Orleans, they really haven't had that ability to get that spark in the return game. It just hasn't been there. But Rashid Shaheed, the rookie, he's going to play this weekend. It's a guy who broke the record in college for most kickoff return touchdowns with 7. And if he can give them just one spark here or there, I think that's something that could really flip the game on its head.
I have never asked this question regarding a Saints home game, but then there's never been a Saints home game where a South Louisiana legend like Joe Burrow has come in to play against the home team. I still think it's going to be a regular Saints home game with maybe a little bit more thrown in, but I'm curious to your opinion and how much Bengals support do you think there'll be in the Dome on Sunday?
Yeah, I was thinking about it yesterday, and that's been kind of a hot topic on Twitter. I see a lot of Saints fans have been kind of battling over it, and some people debating whether or not it's wrong to wear a Joe Burrow LSU jersey. When I look at the ticket sales for this game, that's kind of something I've been monitoring over the last couple of days, and it kind of seems like there's, obviously it's going to be primarily Saints. It's still a Saints home game and an important one if they could climb to 3-3 here. I still wouldn't be surprised if 25% of people in there are rooting for the Bengals, maybe even a little bit more, depending on how well Cincinnati fans travel. That much I don't know entirely about their fan base in terms of travel, but I do think Joe Burrow is going to get a lot of support, and he talked about it yesterday. He said he doesn't expect to get a lot of support. I think that would just be him just playing it coy on his part. I think he will get a good amount of cheers from the fans in the Superdome, but I still expect primarily Saints. But I do expect to see some Bengals jerseys in there, and I definitely expect to see some LSU colors.
Yeah, we were talking yesterday. There are LSU fans that don't really support or follow the Saints, and there are a lot of Saints fans that don't follow or support LSU. But I think for the most part, they're fans of both. And while they'll root for Joe Burrow every other week, they'll root for the Saints. They don't want anything. I just saw somebody in the chat said, I hope Burrow throws for 3 touchdowns and Chase catches 2, and the Bengals lose by a point. I think that's probably an opinion that's shared by a lot of people. They don't want anything bad for Joe Burrow, but they're not going to root against the Saints either. Does that make any sense?
I mean, I think considering what that LSU team did, I think it does kind of make sense. I think for some games you never really consider it, right? Like, back then, if the Saints played the Rams and Odell Beckham was doing his thing, maybe you're not saying, I want OBJ to absolutely light up the Saints, or maybe that might just be a bad example because LSU fans just adore OBJ. But in this particular example, you're talking about a quarterback who in the 2019 season capped it off with that 5-touchdown performance against Clemson in the very same stadium that he's going to be in on Sunday. So I do think there is that emotional tie. And I have no problem with people kind of saying, hey, if he has a 3-touchdown game and 300 yards, but the Saints win, that's cool with me. And on the flip side, if people are going to go the other way and say, I hope the Saints sack Joe Burrow 5 times and they get this win, I think that's perfectly okay too. But I don't think there's anything really wrong with Saints fans also wishing the best for Joe Burrow, as long as they're wishing the best for Joe Burrow with the Saints win on the side.
Yeah, I think it's the quarterback, and the fact that he was, the Heisman in the year and everything. Friends, Devin White was a phenomenal player here, okay, and a great guy. Everybody liked Devin White. He was a high pick, but he plays for the Bucs now. And I don't hear LSU fans saying, you know what, I root for Devin White even though I'm a Saints fan. It's like, nah, man, you play for the Bucs now, okay? If Burrow played for the Falcons, we'd have a real problem, okay? But he plays for the Bengals, who the Saints hardly ever play. It's just kind of strange. It'll be an odd thing, but I expect the Dome to be, it turned out almost completely for the Saints. Chris, as always, we appreciate it. Check out your stuff at Boot Krewe Media following the New Orleans Saints. Thanks so much for your time.